Two men, two armies, one prize, the world. On one side, Darius III, King of Kings, ruler of the sprawling Persian Achaemenid Empire, a domain stretching from the Aegean Sea to the Indus River. He is a man haunted by a previous humiliating defeat, now staking everything on a single massive gamble. On the other side, Alexander of Macedon, a 25-year-old upstart, a brilliant and shockingly ambitious king who has already brought the Greek world to heel and now aims to conquer its historic enemy. Imagine the scene. It's the 1st of October, 331 BC. The sun rises over a vast, deliberately flattened plain in what is now northern Iraq. This place is called Gaugamela. Here, Darius has gathered the full might of his empire. Ancient historians speak of 1 million men. Modern estimates suggest a still staggering force of up to 250,000 soldiers, a sea of humanity drawn from every corner of Asia. There are elite Bactrian horsemen, ferocious Scythian archers, and, for the first time, 15 war elephants intended to sow terror. He has even brought 200 chariots with cruel, scythe-like blades fixed to their wheels, for which he has carefully leveled the battlefield. Facing this immense host is Alexander's army, perhaps 40,000 infantry and 7,000 cavalry. They are battle-hardened, disciplined and loyal, but they are catastrophically outnumbered, thousands of miles from home, and facing an enemy fighting for its very survival. That night, a lunar eclipse spooks the troops, but Alexander's priests cleverly interpret it as a sign of Persia's downfall, not theirs. As dawn breaks, the stakes are absolute. For Darius, it is the last chance to save his dynasty. For Alexander, it is the ultimate test of his genius and his destiny. One mistake, one moment of hesitation, and his army will be swallowed whole, his campaign will end in disaster, and his name will become a footnote. The future of two civilizations hangs in the balance, waiting for the first move on this dusty patch of earth. This is the story of how, in a few short hours, one man's audacity didn't just win a battle, it shattered an empire. Road to Gaugamela. The road to Gaugamela was paved with 2 years of simmering tension and meticulous preparation. After Alexander's stunning victory at the Battle of Issus in 333 BC, Darius III had fled the field, leaving his own family to be captured. Humiliated but not broken, he retreated to the heart of his empire to lick his wounds and plot his revenge. He sent Alexander letters offering immense wealth, all lands west of the Euphrates, and even his daughter's hand in marriage for peace. Alexander, in a display of supreme confidence, refused. He sought not a truce but total conquest. While Alexander spent the next 2 years securing the Mediterranean coast, conquering Phoenicia, besieging Tyre, and being welcomed in Egypt as a liberator, Darius was frantically rebuilding his military. He learned from his mistakes at Issus, a battle fought in a narrow space that negated his numerical superiority. This time, he would choose the battlefield, a wide open plain near Gaugamela, perfect for his vast cavalry and scythed chariots. He levied troops from the farthest reaches of his empire, Medes, Syrians, Armenians, and elite horsemen from Bactria and Scythia under the command of his satrap Bessus. Meanwhile, Alexander, having established the city of Alexandria in Egypt, began his march east. His army traversed Syria and Mesopotamia, an arduous journey through punishing heat. His scouts soon returned with terrifying news of the Persian army's sheer size. Modern estimates suggest a force outnumbering the Macedonians by at least 4 to 1. The night before the battle, Alexander's senior general, the veteran Parmenion, urged a night attack to sow confusion among the massive Persian force. Alexander famously refused, stating he would not steal his victory, He let his men rest, confident that his strategy, training and leadership would triumph in the full light of day. The two armies. On paper, the mismatch was almost laughable. Darius's strategy was one of overwhelming mass. He placed himself in the center, as was Persian tradition, guarded by his elite infantry, the 10,000 immortals, and his 2,000 Greek mercenary hoplites. His battle line stretched for miles, with cavalry wings stacked deep on either side, commanded by his most trusted satraps, Bessus on the left and Mazias on the right. The scythed chariots were positioned at the very front, a terrifying psychological weapon meant to carve bloody lanes through the Macedonian infantry. Alexander's army was a marvel of combined arms efficiency. His core was the phalanx, 9,000 heavy infantrymen armed with the sarissa, a formidable 13-foot pike that presented an unstoppable wall of spear points. Flanking them were the 3,000 hypaspists, or shield-bearers, a more flexible elite infantry unit that acted as a hinge between the phalanx and the cavalry. The main striking force, however, was on the right wing, the companion cavalry, 1,800 of the finest horsemen in the ancient world, led by Alexander himself. But Alexander's genius was in his formation. Facing a much longer enemy line, he knew he would be outflanked. To counter this, he arranged his army in an oblique order, with his right wing advanced and his left wing refused, or-angled backward at a 45-degree angle. This setup was designed to bait the Persian cavalry into attacking his flanks. Crucially, he also established a second line of infantry in reserve, with orders to wheel around and counter any encirclement. His army wasn't just a line, it was a highly flexible, hollow square, designed to bend but not break. It wasn't a formation for a shoving match, it was an elaborate trap. Dawn and the opening moves. As the sun climbed, the plain erupted with the sound of Persian drums. Darius, having kept his men on alert all night, gave the order to advance. The scythed chariots charged first, a fearsome wave of flashing blades and thundering hooves. But Alexander was ready. He had ordered his frontline light infantry, the highly mobile Agrianians, to open their ranks at the last moment. Instead of crashing into a wall of shields, the chariots were funneled into harmless channels where javelin men and archers attacked their exposed sides. The much-feared charge collapsed into chaos. Simultaneously, Alexander began the signature maneuver of the day. He did not charge straight ahead. Instead, leading his right wing, he began a slow, deliberate advance diagonally to the right, moving further and further away from the ground Darius had so carefully prepared. This baffling move had a dual purpose. It drew the battle away from the flattened terrain intended for the chariots, and more importantly, it was pure psychological bait. Darius, fearing Alexander was trying to outflank his line entirely, did exactly what Alexander wanted. He ordered Bessus to send his Bactrian and Scythian cavalry from the Persian left to intercept Alexander's advance. As more and more Persian cavalry were pulled to the flank to counter this sideways movement, the seemingly impenetrable Persian front line began to stretch and thin like pulled taffy. Darius, watching anxiously, kept feeding more units to his left, dangerously weakening the link to his center. The gap opens. While Alexander orchestrated his complex gambit on the right, his left flank, under the command of the old General Parmenion, was in grave danger. The Persian right-wing cavalry, commanded by Mazias, launched a massive assault, threatening to overwhelm Parmenion's Thessalian horsemen. The fighting was desperate, a brutal holding action designed to buy Alexander time. For a moment it seemed the Macedonian left would collapse. A gap even opened in the Macedonian line itself, and a force of Persian and Indian cavalry broke through. But instead of turning to attack Parmenion from the rear, they made a critical error and rode straight for the Macedonian baggage camp to loot. Parmenion, seeing his flank on the verge of collapse, sent a desperate message to Alexander pleading for help. The entire battlefield was now a ticking clock. The center of the Macedonian army, the great phalanx, held firm, its long sarissas creating a bristling forest of death that the Persian infantry could not penetrate. But their position was becoming untenable. The whole battle hinged on a single question: could Alexander break through the Persian line before Parmenion's flank was completely destroyed? Alexander's charge. This was the moment Alexander had been waiting for. He had seen it: the overstretched Persian line, the thinning center, the gap created by Darius's obsessive focus on the flank. Ignoring Parmenion's plea for aid, a calculated risk that showed his unshakable nerve, Alexander made his move. He wheeled the companion cavalry, forming them into their famous wedge formation. Lowering his spear, he spurred his horse Bucephalus into a full gallop charge. 1,800 horsemen slammed into the weakened point in the Persian line, punching clean through the royal guard and aiming directly for Darius himself. Arrian, the ancient historian, describes the terror that seized the Persian king, who had already long been in a state of fear. Faced with the ferocious spear-first charge of the Macedonian cavalry, Darius did what he had done at Issus. He panicked. He spun his war chariot around and fled the battlefield. The moment the royal standard wavered and fell, panic spread like a virus. The sight of the King of Kings abandoning his army shattered the Persian morale. His personal guards broke. Then the infantry in the center threw down their shields and ran. The rout became a cascade. With the Persian center dissolving, the battle was effectively over. The trap had sprung. Aftermath on the field. Victory, however, was not yet secure. Alexander faced a critical choice: pursue and capture Darius, potentially ending the war in a single stroke, or turn back to rescue his beleaguered left flank. He chose his men over his prize. Wheeling about, Alexander's companions engaged in some of the fiercest fighting of the day, crashing into the Persian right-wing cavalry who were returning from looting the Macedonian camp. It was a brutal, chaotic melee, but the Macedonians prevailed. Darius escaped eastward with a small contingent of his guards and the Bactrian cavalry led by Bessus. He would never command another army. The Persian Empire, the superpower of the ancient world for over 2 centuries, was mortally wounded. The battlefield was a vision of carnage. Ancient sources claimed tens of thousands of Persians lay dead, with thousands more captured, along with Darius's personal chariot and baggage. Alexander's losses were shockingly light in comparison, estimated at perhaps a few hundred to 1,000 men. The path to the heart of Persia was now wide open. The great cities of the empire began to fall like dominoes. Babylon welcomed Alexander as a liberator, its governor Mazaeus surrendering the city peacefully. Susa, the administrative capital, followed suit, yielding its vast royal treasury. Soon, Alexander would march into Persepolis, the ceremonial heart of the Achaemenid dynasty, and the great Persian experiment would be over. The Hellenistic age had begun. Enjoying the ride? Hit subscribe. Epic battles land here every week. And if you're curious how Alexander turned this victory into an empire stretching from Egypt to India, the playlist's waiting right after this. Why the plan worked. Alexander's victory at Gaugamela wasn't just a matter of courage, though he had plenty. It was a triumph of tactical genius, discipline, and innovation. He used Darius's greatest strength, his overwhelming numbers, and turned it into a fatal weakness. By employing the oblique advance, he forced Darius to react to him, stretching the Persian line until it became fragile and thin. His combined arms system was revolutionary. Each part of his army, the phalanx, the cavalry, the light infantry, had a specific role in a perfectly choreographed sequence. The phalanx acted as a stable anvil, pinning the Persian infantry. The light troops neutralized the chariot threat. The cavalry on the left flank under Parmenion fought a brilliant bloody holding action. And the companion cavalry on the right acted as the decisive hammer. Crucially, Alexander's plan was flexible. The second reserve line was a stroke of genius, providing security against the very encirclement that seemed inevitable. And his leadership was inspirational. By leading the decisive charge himself, he demoralized his enemy and inspired his men to feats of incredible bravery. Military academies to this day study Gaugamela as a masterclass in how superior strategy, timing, and discipline can defeat brute force. The human cost. It's easy to get lost in the brilliant maneuvers and grand strategy, but the price of Gaugamela was paid in blood. For the Macedonian soldiers, they were thousands of miles from their homes, many of them veterans who had marched with Alexander since the beginning. For the Persian levies, many were simple farmers, herders, and craftsmen conscripted from their villages to fight in our king's war. The ground after the battle was a horrific landscape of shattered shields, broken spears, and dying men who would never see their homes or families again. The fates of the two commanders tell the whole story. Alexander reportedly wept when he heard of the heavy casualties his general Parmenion had suffered on the left flank. Darius III, the King of Kings, became a fugitive in his own empire. Hunted by Alexander, he fled east, desperately trying to rally a new army. But his authority was shattered. Within a year, he would be betrayed and murdered by his own satrap, Bessus, who hoped to win Alexander's favor. Alexander, upon finding Darius's body, was said to have been saddened and gave his former enemy a royal burial at Persepolis. Empires, then as now, are built on the graves of men. Legacy in stone and story. The victory at Gaugamela didn't just end an empire, it sparked a cultural revolution. In the decade that followed, Alexander founded over a dozen new cities named Alexandria, planting them like seeds of Greek culture across Asia and Egypt. This began the Hellenistic Age, an unprecedented fusion of Greek, Persian, Egyptian, and Indian civilizations. Koine Greek, a common dialect, became the language of trade and government from the Mediterranean to the borders of India, facilitating communication and the exchange of ideas for centuries. Trade routes, once controlled by competing factions, were unified, allowing spices, silk, and other goods to flow between East and West. This cultural blending created new art forms, like the Greco-Buddhist art of Gandhara, and new philosophical schools like Stoicism and Epicureanism flourished in this new cosmopolitan world. For centuries after, coins in distant Afghanistan would bear the profile of a Greek king. One battle had rewired the politics, culture, and language of 3 continents. What if Darius had held? Let's indulge in a moment of counterfactual history. What if Darius hadn't fled? Imagine he holds his ground, his elite guard repels Alexander's charge, and the Macedonian wedge gets bogged down in the center. Mazaeus's cavalry on the Persian right finally crushes Parmenion's flank. Alexander, now isolated and encircled, is either captured or killed. The consequences are staggering. The Persian Empire survives, perhaps even experiencing a resurgence and pushing the fractured Greek forces back out of Asia Minor. Back in Greece, the city-states would likely resume their endless cycle of civil wars without a unifying leader like Alexander. 2 centuries later, a rising Roman Republic would not have faced a collection of bickering Hellenistic successor kingdoms, but a unified, still vast Persian empire. The entire trajectory of Western civilization would pivot on a different axis. But that's not what happened. Darius ran, his nerve broke, and history followed the path forged by Alexander's spear. From battlefield to myth, Gaugamela became a legend almost as soon as the dust settled. Roman emperors and poets would celebrate Alexander's audacity. Napoleon Bonaparte studied the oblique march before his own masterpiece at Austerlitz, and generations of military leaders have analyzed its tactics. Today, the battlefield near modern-day Erbil in Iraqi Kurdistan is a quiet place of wind and barley fields. There are no grand monuments, no visitor centers. There is only a quiet mound, Tel Gomel, believed to be the camel's house for which the battle was named, and the faint echo of a clash that shaped the world. Modern archaeologists still debate the precise lines of the armies, searching for the physical traces of that monumental day. It serves as a powerful reminder that sometimes the most pivotal moments in human history, the ones that create shadows stretching for millennia, leave the smallest footprints on the earth itself. One man's vision. One afternoon on a dusty plain. One perfectly timed, audacious charge. At Gaugamela, Alexander the Great didn't just defeat an army. He decapitated an empire that had dominated the world for 2 centuries. In a single decisive stroke, he erased the old world map and laid the foundations for a new one, ushering in the Hellenistic era that would blend East and West in ways never seen before. From the founding of the Library of Alexandria to the spread of Greek philosophy and even the language of the New Testament, the ripples of that day are still felt. Not bad for a king who was outnumbered 4-1, standing on a patch of dirt that would forever be known as the place where the Persian Empire died. History isn't just about dates and dead kings. It's about those heart-stopping moments when everything, empires, cultures, the future itself, balances on the tip of a spear.